Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brice Lewis. And obviously, you know what we do here on this show. We talk about everything football. And so we're going to get down to the breakdowns that we do every week on this show. Either if it's just these episodes or just me, or our other episodes that premiere on Tuesday with me and Ethan. We always try to bring you the best possible football news and updates that we possibly can that happen in both college and professional football as well. Today's show, for me, this won't happen on me and Ethan's show. I think we'll still be more of a topic and news-centric for the most part in terms of when we are together. But for this, obviously the NFL season will be back in terms of live football in August with preseason, which I have news about coming up. But also, we're getting close to the regular season training camp and etc. So, it may be early, but I'm going to start doing some team previews for the coming season, and we're going to break down each division for the next few weeks. So today's division that we're going to break down is the AFC East. So for the whole rest of the show, unless you have no interest in the AFC East, we will be breaking them down while also giving you a story each segment to start every segment to at least keep you informed with what's going on around the NFL and etc. So, but matter of fact, like I said earlier, we have some news about the preseason that I want to get into that we're going to get into right now. And so, as you know, reported a long time ago by people, outlets that I've talked about on the podcast as well, the NFL has been thinking about shortening the preseason. And they have now officially decided to shorten the preseason. They are cutting it to 2 weeks. They're cutting off the first week and the fourth week of the preseason. I'm assuming that they're going to keep the schedule the same, but that'll just be an extra week of practice for both of those weeks without games. So obviously, this was something that I believe that they were already going to do, they were trying to do, and that were headed to do because obviously with everything going on with COVID, they probably wanted to reduce the amount of games before the actual games that counted actually were played. So that's the plan for them. Obviously, I mean, people have been saying anyway, or, you know, people who have been saying for the longest that the preseason should have been cut down and shortened anyway are pretty much now going to have their wish now that the preseason has now been shifted to only 2 games. And maybe, like I said, this will be a start of now for the next time being they'll continue to be 2 preseason games. Because remember, in the CBA, they were agreed to only be 3 preseason games. So clearly with that being known, the fact they're going with 2, I mean, you'll never basically see out a 4 preseason game season again after last year's preseason. So now this year we'll get 2, but don't forget when the next season comes around, after this current season that happens, we'll get into the CBA, and then it will only be 3 preseason games on a yearly basis. So that was the news there when it came to the preseason. So I just want to give you that update from the NFL. But now we're going to get to our NFC East preview and predictions. So obviously I'm going to break down every team from the AFC East for the rest of the show. So I guess every team will have their own segment, as they say. And I'm just going to give you my thoughts on storylines and different parts of the team and things going into the season. I'll give you my predictions on how I expect them to do this season as well. So we're going to talk about all that here on the podcast. And we're just going to break them down. Obviously, we're going to stick with the AFC for the next couple of shows. Obviously, individual shows with me on them, not with me and Ethan. And so if you are not interested, like I said, in this, you don't have to stick around. Definitely would want you to stick around just because I may have some interesting opinions that you might want to think about. If you're a true football fan who just loves the game, even if you have a favorite team, this is also the podcast for you as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. And the first team we're going to get into in the AFC East will be the New England Patriots. We're going to start off with last year's reigning AFC East champions, and now what a lot of people think will be the last year in maybe a few years before they win it again. That was until they signed my man, Cameron Newton, Big Cam, Yes, sir. Yeah, obviously, as me and Ethan talked about, and then what you heard over the last week and weekend, the New England Patriots have signed Cam Newton to a 1-year deal, incentive-laden deal. It's for a year there. He's going to work with Bill Belichick in that offense, and he will probably battle Jarrett Stidham for the starting job. So, obviously, this was a very interesting pickup. Honestly, New England's offseason for the most part has been a very quiet one. They've lost a lot of guys. They lost Kyle Van Noy. They've lost guys up front. Obviously, they lost Tom Brady, which was the big loss. Obviously, the era of Tom Brady is over there. So people are wondering how they're going to advance at the quarterback position. Remember, Bill Belichick's up there in age. So people wonder, is Bill Belichick really okay to go through a rebuilding process at this point in his career? And I think that's just something that will make things very interesting. So we'll have to see. I mean, we really have to see what actually helps, or what happens to see after, this all happens with Tom Brady and everything, because obviously people are going to judge the success on Tom Brady's first year with Tampa Bay and also in Bill Belichick's first year without Tom Brady on New England. So obviously the New England Patriots have some issues with the roster. First issue is this. What was the issue last year? They didn't have any dynamic playmakers outside of Julian Edelman, who played most of the year injured. This year, they still have the exact same issue. Now, obviously, they have guys like Henry, the rookie from last year. They're hoping that he can have a step-up year this year. Obviously, he was hurt last year. Plus, also, we all know that New England's offense is probably one of the most rigid offenses in all of the NFL. So it's very hard for young players to have success in the offense. But hopefully they're expecting him to step up this year. Obviously, Julian Edelman is still there. So he's Mr. Old Reliable safety blanket for whoever is the starting quarterback. Obviously, one thing I think that really hurt New England last year was the running game. The running game was not as effective as it was in previous years. Sony Michel took a year back. And really, basically, their best running back, you can almost say, was Rex Burkhead. Obviously, you still got White there, who's still catching passes out of the backfield, but it just wasn't the same. New England, one of the reasons why they won that last Super Bowl is because they were able to have a dynamic running attack. In the playoffs, especially when it showed up, and just last year, they could never get a running game consistently going. They did have some injuries up front on the offensive line, but even when they got a little bit more healthier, it just wasn't happening. And then you have an offense that doesn't have the greatest receiving core in the league. It just didn't seem like the offense was that great. And so it's something that they didn't really, again, try to go out of their way to address. Now, they added some guys, but nobody too spectacular. So it seems like they're really going into the offense really with the same players from last year and then a different quarterback. They drafted a couple of tight ends, so obviously we'll have to see if maybe they can create an impact on the passing game, because obviously that's when New England, as we remember, was at their finest, was when they had 2 tight ends. And we'll have to look from there. But one thing we have to look at too is the defense. Remember, like I said, they've lost some guys. They lost guys up front. They lost guys in the secondary. They lost guys at linebacker. They lost guys at every level. They still have Stephon Gilmore there, who is still one of the better shutdown corners. They still have the McCourties. Their secondary is probably the most untouched part of their team, I would say. But every other part, the front 7 was really decimated this offseason. So when you look at this team, the reason why some people are somewhat worried to say New England's going to have a down year is because this is New England. Even when Tom Brady went down with that torn ACL, they still went 11-5. It's one of those things where they've been so good for so long, they just have that respect where you don't want to sit here and say, well, but now they've lost these people, they're not going to be able to overcome it. They're just not a team that you're comfortable saying that about, because even when Brady played and they had massive injuries and massive key players get down, they still went on to win Super Bowls and be in the playoffs and make deep runs. So it's kind of hard to really know, how good will they be? Will New England's system still be able to get them 10 wins this year? And obviously, I think that's what makes this team so interesting on paper. Obviously, with Cam Newton, if he is the starting quarterback, he makes them a much more interesting team. He makes them a much more exciting team. And obviously, that's going to create, some media waves in New England. I mean, we'll have to really see how it all works out, of course, but we think that there's a positive trend here. And really, overall, New England in general, one thing they don't have to deal with this year that they've dealt with in the past 2 decades is now they don't have expectations. New England's kind of that team that's you don't know what's going to happen, so you really can't make any decisions or judgments. You kind of just go into it and you kind of just say, let's just see what happens. If they finish last, it's like, I'm not surprised. But if they finish first, it's still, you might be a little bit surprised, but you won't be just so surprised that it's just like, I can't believe that they actually did good. I can't believe that they actually did a good job. I can't believe that they actually were able to pull it off. I don't think that would be what would be said. I think you'll hear a lot of, Bill Belichick's a genius. When they added Cam or if Jarrett Stidham plays well, they knew what they were doing. You'll hear a lot of praise of the decision making and the decisions that were made this offseason, when a lot of people were maybe questioning some of the decisions that were being made because they didn't know how it would turn out at the end of the day. So it's definitely something interesting. And so, I think New England's in a very precarious position right now. And really, if they really take this season a certain way, I think they should take this as a year. Because really, Bill Belichick's never had a year where he had to develop the team. Like, obviously, the first month of the season, they would still try out stuff and try to get things down. But usually, for the most part, New England teams were very well developed. The players they had, you knew what they were. You knew how good they were. And they were only incorporating like one or two new players. And they could easily just put them out there and just say, either you work or you don't work. Because we have everybody else who does work. This is going to be the first year, I think, New England's coming into the season with a lot of young guys, with a lot of uncertainty and not high expectations. And Bill Belichick can really look at this year and say, let me develop this team. Let me get the guys coached up. Let me see progression week by week, because Bill Belichick probably knows if we can get certain players up to a certain standard and up to par, we would be able to compete at a high level even the next year, even if we don't compete at a great level this year. So it's going to be interesting. It really will. So we'll have to see. New England is, like I said, in one of the most very interesting positions they've been in for a long time. Because they really haven't been in a spot like this for a while. They really haven't been in a spot like this for a while. And I think this is something that they should definitely cherish. And this is something they should definitely look into and be like, okay, we're going to take this and we're going to run with it. I mean, New England could honestly finish first or last in this division. I mean, this division as a whole is like I said on my show with Ethan the other day. This division doesn't have a definitive clear one. Now, like, obviously you may have a one that you think is going to come out, but it's not like it was with New England the last 20 years where it was just like, yeah, New England's winning it, then who's going to finish second? This year is the first year was like, yeah, we think Buffalo, but we don't know, because Buffalo doesn't have that same consistency of winning yet, where you expect it year from year, even though you do expect them from a roster perspective to be that good. So, honestly, I think they'll finish at best, in my opinion, second, even though they could win first. I'm going to go second, but obviously I think the least they can finish is fourth. It really just depends on how the other teams are. It really just depends. I mean, remember, they opened the season against Miami. So that would be a great indicator of where both teams are, and obviously, like I said, sometimes New England doesn't even do great in the first month of the season, but then they always had Tom Brady. They had those players. Now they don't have them. So if they didn't start off hot, would that be the trend of the season? Would they not finish the season hot, or would it be a typical Bill Belichick New England thing? They might start off 2-2, 1-3, and then come back and they're now 11-5, 10-6. It's definitely something that, as a fan, I'm going to keep an eye on, and we'll have to see. We really have to see what happened. So this is going to be something I think New England fans should look into the season as. We could just look at this season without that pressure and just say, it's just going to be interesting to see what happens. It's just going to be fun to see what we turn into without Tom Brady, to see the post-Brady era, to see if Bill Belichick's really that guy. There's a lot of storylines within the New England team. And listen, they may not look like the greatest team on paper, roster-wise, or any of that. But they're definitely a team I think you can't sit there and just think it's over. They're not going to be good, and we should just completely write them off. Because listen, next year they may be looking for a quarterback. Hey, for all we know, they could be tanking for Trevor Lawrence. But listen, at the end of the day, New England's going to be back. We don't know when. They could be back next year, but they will be back. But coming up next, Chris Jones, star defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs, might sit out the entire season. And then we're also going to get into the New York Jets season preview. All that right here and more on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we discussed the NFL cutting the preseason by 2 weeks. So we're going to eliminate the first week and the fourth week of the preseason. And in 11 days, all teams will play their 2 preseason games. So, with that being known, we're going to look at this. We also talked about an AFC East preview. And last segment, we reviewed the New England Patriots. And we previewed their season. My thoughts on the team, what they look like they're going into the season, and all of that. So obviously that was something that we discussed here on the podcast. And, you know, like I said, New England's an interesting team. They're a team that doesn't really have the expectations like they used to have. So it's just going to be interesting to see how it all works out at the end of the day, I think. And I think everybody would agree with me as well. But now we got to get into this segment. And we're going to get into some more news. And Chris Jones, star defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs, is now saying that he might not play this season. He says he's thinking about sitting out an entire season like Le'Veon Bell because of contract negotiations. So clearly he feels like the Kansas City Chiefs need to pay him a certain amount of money, and he's willing to sit out the season if they don't. Now, one thing I said is, before when I was on the show with Ethan, I said that, is this a good time for players to sit out? And I started thinking to myself, when Chris Jones said this, if he sat out, you could logically make the explanation in the actual argument that it's not even just because of the contract. I mean, listen, I've said going into the season, you might have players say, I'm not comfortable playing the NFL season with COVID going on. That nobody's saying it now, but you don't know what's going to happen when the season starts and stuff goes on. And so he could honestly make even though he won't use this as a reason, he could easily use this and say, well, not only am I not getting the money that I think I should get, but we also have a whole pandemic and COVID-19 that you're wanting us to play through. So on top of that, that should definitely give me the money I should get. Because listen, you want me to put myself on the line for you guys and then don't pay me? Because this isn't a regular season where it's just like, oh, I just want to get paid more because I think I'm a great player and you should just pay me. He could use the reasoning of, listen, COVID's going on right now. If you really want me back there out on that field, you need to pay me the money that I feel like I am deserved. And then I'll go out there and risk myself for you guys. Because at least I'm getting paid. So, obviously, that's something that will be interesting to see. Would Chris Jones really sit out the season? Obviously, in a situation like Kansas City's, when you're going to have to pay Patrick Mahomes pretty soon, Sometimes giving out other big contracts you're a little hesitant on because you don't know how it's going to affect the contract negotiations with your quarterback. That's why sometimes you always have those star players who want that big deal before that quarterback gets their big deal. And you either see teams let them walk, or they get franchised, or they become very hesitant to give them the deal they want because they don't want it to mess with the potential money they could have to give to Patrick Mahomes, which a lot of people have said, hey, he could get $200 million. So it's definitely a very interesting situation. It really might be. It really might be a very interesting situation. So we got to keep an eye on that, and we'll see if Chris Jones really is going to do what Le'Veon Bell did if he doesn't get paid and sit out the season, because we understand and we know how important he was to the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl run last year, because without him, Kansas City may have never won the Super Bowl, and they may have never gotten as far as they got, because he was one of the key additions to why they were able to get to where they were able to get to at the end of the day. But now we're going to continue on with our AFC East review, and we're going to talk about this segment, the New York Jets. Yes, the Jets. Jetts. Jets. Yes, sir. The Jets. The Jets are the most, I would say, out of every team in the division, they're the most controversial in my opinion, because you currently have your best player, or your best skill player, Jamal Adams, wanting out because you won't pay him. You have Adam Gase, who a lot of fans within the New York fan base that are not fans of. Jamal Adams also pointed as being one of the reasons why he wants to leave. We already know Adam Gase and Le'Veon Bell doesn't have the best relationship. You go back to Adam Gase's time in Miami, Jarvis Landry had an issue with him. Kenny Stills wasn't the fondest of him. And it's starting to grow a trend here that it seems like a lot of good players or star players are not particularly in line with Adam Gase. They're not particularly liking him. I mean, remember, even after one season, people were calling for Gase's head. Gase is on some thin ice right now. And it makes you wonder how many people in that locker room really want to go out there and play for him. If your bestest player on defense and one of your best players, if not the best player of your team, is saying he don't want to play for him, how many other players in that locker room feel that same way? The Jets are going to be very much looked at, because if they start to struggle, will the team quit? Do they even want to try for that man? Because if Adam Gase doesn't play well, I think everybody knows he's out of there. I think even whatever happens with Sam Darnold, I think Sam Darnold will get another year regardless. Remember, they played well down the stretch when Sam Darnold got back from mono. He played well. And not even with the best weapons, Sam Darnold, even though he doesn't have the greatest career to start off, you see that he can play. You just wonder what would happen if the Jets gave him a much better constructive offense, weapons, and everything. Remember, their offensive line was atrocious last year. He was running for his life. And Adam Gase is supposed to be this quarterback whisperer, offensive guru. And so far, we have yet to see that. So, we're trying to see, like, hey, what will the Jets be this year? I mean, the Jets have talent on both sides of the ball. They're the team in the AFC East that no one really talks about, too, if you think about it. Everybody's talking about New England without Brady, and now with Cam. Everybody's talking about Miami, how great Flores is, and Tua being the future. People are talking about Buffalo because they're expected to be the best team in the division. Josh Allen's development. But who's really talking about the Jets? Who's really having a segment about the Jets? Really? That's a question. Not saying that nobody cares about the Jets, but clearly they're not on everybody's radar. And the Jets are probably, out of all, to me, I think Miami's the biggest wild card, but they're my second biggest wild card. in the entire division, in my opinion. Because no one said they're going to be the worst team, but no one said they're going to be the best team. People think the Jets are going to finish either second or third, if anything, in the rankings. I mean, listen. First thing for me is that relationship with Le'Veon Bell. He is one of the best runners in the league. You don't want to sit here and alienate one of your best players on purpose, which I think Gase has done to an extent by not really being that supportive of him ever since they signed him. Remember, when he got that big deal, you heard reports Gase was not a fan because he does not believe in paying a running back that much money. And then you got Jamal Adams now not getting paid the money he wants, but also saying, I'm not really fond of that guy. And, Sam Darnold, he's having to go through all this dysfunction and all this controversy. It is just like, dang, he's just out here probably just trying to play some football and try to be successful and have a good career. And it feels like every time something happens, they're keeping him from doing it. So I definitely can understand if there's even any type of frustration from Sam Darnold on this situation, because he's just trying to go out there and work and be the best possible player he can be. And they're kind of making it more difficult on him for whatever reason. And I don't think they should. Sam Darnold is definitely a guy who has shown flashes of being a franchise quarterback. It's just everything has not came together while he's been on the Jets. And the Jets have to figure that out. They have to figure out how can we put everything together so we can be successful going into the future. Because I think, listen, they have to be that type of team that has a top running back or a very dominant running game or an effective running game, and then play action would probably be their best bet, in my opinion, with the type of team they have assembled. Because the Jets were at their peak with Rex Ryan because they ran the football and played great defense. And they have to go back to that formula right now. Remember, they opened the season against the Bills, who a lot of people are predicting to be the best team in the AFC East. So if the Jets want to make a statement, they could go out and beat the Bills week 1 and let people know, listen, we can win the division. We're just as good, if not better, than any of these teams. But it just all comes down to the support of Gase and can they put it all together. The Jets are not on roster basis, they're probably mid of the pack, midway in terms of roster talent. But with the right amount of coaching, they could easily be a team that could potentially sneak in. I always say, with that extra playoff spot added, you might be able to go 8-8 now, 9-7, and make the playoffs. Literally, if all you gotta do is win half your games, and you'll have a chance, depending on how good the division is that year. And so, do you think the Jets maybe can't be an 8-8 team potentially? I think they could. If they get a couple of games swing their way, go 9-10 wins, boom, playoff team. So, but again, that's how I feel about a lot of teams in this division. I'm not saying that the AFC East is going to have like 3 teams in the playoffs, but don't be surprised if they have 2. They could sneak somebody in there. It just takes them, being the best they can be. That's what it takes. Because you never know. You really never know what's going to happen when it gets down to it, when they get on that field and they play at a high level. The Jets fans obviously are obviously people say New York is still a Giants town. And the Jets have never really been able to get that same, love back. The Jets used to be the talk of the town. The Giants were the Now the Giants are. But really, both New York teams haven't been that great. Last time the Giants were great was when they won their last Super Bowl. The last time the Jets were great when they were making AFC Championship games with Rex Ryan. Both of those were either at the end or were both at the beginning of the decade of the 2010s It's been a while since the Jets have been relevant or good. It's been a very long time. And I know Jet fans are ready to be good again. They're ready to actually have a team they can say, we have something going for us. They have Fireman Ed. They have great fans. They just got to put it together. And they've always had dysfunction within that organization, and that dysfunction is what's hurt them at the end of the day. And they need to fix it if they're going to actually get there at the end of the day. Because the Jets have talent on this team. You know what I'm saying? They have talent on this team. They had a good draft. They still got your quarterback. You got Le'Veon. If they can work things out, you got Jamal. This team isn't that bad. They just got to put it together at the end of the day. But coming up next, we're going to get into some more news and another AFC East team as we're going to talk about the Buccaneers and their interest in Antonio Brown. And we'll also preview the Buffalo Bills season coming up right here on the podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we broke down the New York Jets season coming up. Basically just gave an overview of what I thought about their situation going into the season. How, listen, not a lot of people are fans of head coach Adam Gase, so he's on the hot seat this season. He has to produce either with wins to shut everybody up or he's out of there because he doesn't have a lot of support in the fan base. And it doesn't seem like he has a lot of support within his own locker room with Jamal Adams and Le'Veon Bell not being the biggest fans of him as well. We also talked about Chris Jones potentially sitting out the entire season as he has threatened to do so if they do not come on a contract extension. I discussed that really, since that's the case, he has the ability of leverage of saying it's not even just because of the contract. It's also because y'all want me to play in COVID. And why would I want to put myself at risk like that potentially to get myself sick and not be the paid money that I think I deserve? So obviously that's pretty much what I was saying last segment. What are all my thoughts on that? If you want to go back and missed it, you can always rewind. That's what a podcast is here for. So, but now we got to get into this segment. We got to get into the new news. And we're going to get into AB. Antonio Brown obviously has been in the news recently about just because more, not because of anything he did, not because he did anything to get into the news, but because of the fact that people are discussing that maybe a team may be willing to take a flyer on Antonio Brown. They may be willing to pick up Antonio Brown and bring him into their roster. And a team that has been connected to Antonio Brown has been the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because of Tom Brady and his relationship with him. So Tampa Bay has now officially came out and said that Tampa Bay will not be pursuing Antonio Brown, even though Bruce Arians really said it a while ago they wouldn't be pursuing him. But they said they will not be pursuing Antonio Brown, so that AB to Bucks talk should probably be the end of it, as they have no interest in bringing him in to their roster. Obviously, again, there's too many deflecting things. He won't even be the main pass catcher. It'll be Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and that could create issues for Antonio Brown if something happens. So we don't know if a team might take a flyer on him. Listen, we even heard rumblings that Baltimore, Seattle was thinking about maybe. They said Seattle has interest, and the Ravens have at least discussed the possibility. So we don't know if Antonio Brown's even going to go work out, try out, or anything before the season starts. So it'll be interesting to see if anybody's maybe willing to take a waiver on AB, because if he's anything like he used to be when he was in Pittsburgh, he is still probably, if that's the case, one of the better receivers in all of the NFL. But now we're going to continue on with our preseason preview of the AFC East. This segment, we're going to get into the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills have a lot of expectations. For the first time in a while, a long time, years, they are actually predicted to win the AFC East this year. Vegas has them winning the AFC East this year. And so now there's pressure. Now there's expectations. Buffalo was eliminated in the wild card round last year. Honestly, shouldn't have never lost that game if you remember watching it. They are probably one of the bestest constructed rosters. I would say they're a top 10 roster. They have probably also one of the better coaching staffs in the league. Sean McDermott and his staff, I feel like, has really proved themselves as one of the better coaching staffs in all of the league. So the biggest thing for them is this: Josh Allen's development. You clearly know that he's going to determine how good you are this year. If he continues to make progress and play better than he played last year, which is keeping the turnovers low but also making production in the passing game, do big plays on his legs or with his arm, Buffalo should be one of the best teams in the NFL. They had one of the best defenses in the league last year. They have one of the best shutdown corners in Tre'Davious White in the secondary. This team is aggressive defensively and can make plays. Offensively, they can become great too. They can be one of the better teams. The last few years, they never really had a number one receiver. John Brown is a great number two, but he's been their number one the last few years. John Brown can make plays, but he's not a number one receiver. And they fixed that problem. They traded for Stephon Diggs, who's looking for an out of Minnesota. So now with Stephon Diggs there, Josh Allen now has him a proven number one guy who can make plays. If he and Stephon Diggs can gain chemistry, Buffalo's passing game could be one of the best passing games in all of the NFL. And then you still got John Brown there and Cole Beasley. You got John Brown who could make big plays, and Cole Beasley is a chains mover. They also have three. They also like to incorporate the tight end a lot into their offense as well. They have Devin Singletary from last year, from Florida Atlantic, the rookie, who played very well, and they drafted the guy. They clearly have everything in place to be a very competitive team and be one of the better teams in the AFC this year and win the division. They just got to put it together. That's really the main thing that Buffalo has to do if they're going to remain successful this season. They just have to put it together. And, it's hard for a team because Buffalo is still a young team. Their key players are young players. And so they have to really grow into their own this year. I'm sure Sean McDermott's telling these guys, listen, we have a lot of outside noise. A lot of people are expecting a lot out of us, but we expect a lot out of us. So we need to go out there and play Buffalo Bills football. Buffalo's never been taken seriously in God knows how long. And they've had some seasons where they were good. Buffalo, I would say, for the 2010s has always been that team that had a good defense, but they were never dynamic offensively. Buffalo's biggest issue their entire decade was offense. They had running backs. They could run the ball, but quarterback was always an issue. And, that's really what is, in this league is what drives your team to success is the quarterback position. From Ryan Fitzpatrick to Tyrod Taylor, who they made the playoffs with, from so many different guys that they had this past decade. And they feel like Josh Allen's the first guy they feel like that might be able to really reverse the fortunes of their prior history. And so there's going to be pressure on him to really make that leap this year and really prove himself and solidify himself as the franchise quarterback that they drafted him to be. I mean, listen, you had some people think maybe it was Jake Fromm sending a message. I think drafting a 6th-round quarterback, I felt like was a little overzealous to think that, he's going to replace him. If they had drafted someone in the 3rd or 2nd round, we can make that argument. 6th round, not saying it's impossible, because we just saw what happened in Jacksonville with Gardner Minshew, and he was drafted in the 6th round. But you don't draft him initially thinking he's going to be our guy. If anything, you're drafting him to maybe be a project quarterback or a guy who can maybe be a good backup in this league. So, if Jake Fromm was able to be better than that, great, but I don't think Josh Allen is in any risk right now of getting jumped or leaped over by anybody. The job is securely his. He just has to show the improvement that the coaching staff wants to see, and he has to just play well at the end of the day. That's what's going to be asked of him. That's what's going to be expected of him. Because if he doesn't show it, that's where the problem is going to be. He has to come out there and play. He has to come out there and produce. Everybody is expecting Buffalo to be that team this year. And if they truly want to be that team, they need to go out there and be that team. You have it right at your fingertips. The New England Patriots are at the worst in terms of state of their franchise, in terms of roster. They've been since 2000. The Dolphins, we don't know what they're going to be. They added a lot of guys, but will it work? The Jets, the Jets are probably the most dysfunctional franchise in the entire division. You have it all lined up for you to make the playoffs for a second year in a row. And not just make it to the wild card round. Because you got to taste it the last year, but winning a playoff game, having that playoff success. You have the talent to be, some people consider, the third best team in the AFC. Because we know the first and second best teams in the AFC, in no particular order, is Baltimore and Kansas City. But so who's that third best team? And that's where Buffalo can slide in. That's where Buffalo can say, we're the third best team in this division. Entire conference of the AFC. And winning the AFC East and winning big key games throughout the season will show that. Like I said, they opened the season against the Jets. They can make a statement in that game. If you handle the Jets, it's like, okay, they're showing us and they're proving to us that what they can be is for real. What we think they are is for real. I mean, listen, if you look at their first 4 games, they played the Jets, Dolphins, Rams, and Raiders. Realistically, they could go 4-0. They could go 4-0. Imagine the Buffalo starts 4-0. That'd be a big statement. They're playing the Dolphins the second week. That's obviously going to be big to get 2 division wins early. The Rams, West winnable game. Raiders, I think they would be favored in all of these games. So this is the next step of a young team. Winning the games you're supposed to win. That's the first step. And Sean McDermott, I think he was in Carolina when they were good. He knows how Ron Rivera, how it is to win. And now he has to truly, as a head coach, take that next step in his regard. Can he get these guys in position to be a consistent winner year after year and have them in the playoff contention year after year? Because like I said, defensively, they are expected to be one of the best defensive teams in the league again this year. Offensively, they're expected to be much improved. You're expecting Josh Allen to make a jump. You're expecting Stephon Diggs to make a difference. You're expecting Devin Singletary to be more better than he was last year. I mean, this has a lot of potential for both of these teams. So it's just about putting it all together in a pot and coming out with a great product. Obviously, we'll see how, training camp and COVID, and obviously if Buffalo isn't having major injuries, that should help them. But with that being said, they got to come out there and play. They got to come out there and produce. No one's going to look at Buffalo as the team who's coming out of the blue and shocking the world. Like, no, we know Buffalo. We see you. We know you're good. Now that we know you're good, can you stay good? And that's going to be a key for them. This is some uncharted waters for this franchise. They haven't really been in this position in a long time. Best case scenario, they win a division, they make the playoffs, maybe make it to the division or AFC Championship game. Worst case scenario, don't make the playoffs. Makes it feel like you just took a step back, especially with an extra playoff spot. Honestly, any team that I think made the playoffs last year, if they don't make the playoffs, the extra playoff spot makes it look even worse. Because not only did you not make it back into the 6, you had a 7 spot and still couldn't make it back. That means you must have really regressed a little bit. So, like I said, unless injuries happen, because obviously that's a part of the game. So, like I said, there's a lot of things here that can dictate what happens long term. And if they want to be great, they have to, just like I said, whip it together and put out a finished product. Buffalo is definitely a team that has all the potential to be one of the best teams in this conference, in this division, and everything. And listen, Buffalo's going to be playing in front of empty stadiums as well, because they've already said that no fans, in terms of the New York State, has said that no fans will be able to attend their games. So obviously they're going to be playing empty arenas. And you never know if that could maybe help them. Not having the fans there, having those expectations, feeling it in the crowd. You're just going out there and you're playing. Maybe it'll make you a little looser. Maybe it'll make you feel a bit more free. We don't know. We'll just have to see what the Buffalo Bills put out there at the end of the day on the table and see if they can result in them making the playoffs for the second year in a row for the first time in years, in decades. But coming up right here on the podcast, we're going to get into our final AFC team, the Miami Dolphins. And also we have a story on teams may have to fly in and two road games on the same day as the games. For all that right here and more, stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brice Lewis, and welcome back to the podcast. Last segment we discussed that Tampa Bay was not interested in bringing in wide receiver Antonio Brown. They officially made that statement saying that we will not be bringing him in to our organization. So, we can now end that AB to Tampa rumors because Tom Brady is there. They said that we're not interested and we're not going to bring him in, and we need to stick with what they say. Because listen, they already have enough mouths to feed with Rob Gronkowski, O.J. Howard, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin. Adding Antonio Brown to the mix might not be the most ideal thing. We also broke down the Buffalo Bills season as they are predicted to be the AFC East champions at the end of the year. This is their best year to do it, and they have a big opportunity in front of them. They have to make that next step if they want to show everybody around the league that they are truly a team here to stay and truly a team here for the next few years that you need to worry about in the AFC as they're fighting to prove that they are what some people consider the third best team on paper in all of the AFC. But now we're going to get into some more news. And I have an article I'm going to read to you before we get into the last season in review of the Miami Dolphins. As this report says that NFL teams reportedly may fly to and from road games on the same day amid the pandemic. This is off Bleacher Report, Tyler Conray. And I quote, NFL teams are reportedly considering flying to and from road games on the same day to avoid a potential extra exposure to COVID-19. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk reported multiple teams are planning to make the travel adjustment, which could come with several complications. Teams usually fly into cities where they're playing road games the day before a game. Complications for the players would be inherent. Even short flights require prolonged periods of sitting, which can cause stiffness and muscle issues on the day or when players have to perform. It could put them at a greater risk of injury or a competitive disadvantage. Florio pointed towards other complications, including weather and issues with the planes, that could cause games to be pushed back. The NFL has publicly maintained a status quo plan for the 2020 season despite the COVID-19 pandemic. The league plans for training camps to start next month and has not announced any plans to limit attendance once games begin in August. If the NFL moves forward with its plan to have fans in the stands, same-day travel delays could result in thousands of people convening in one place for longer periods of time. New travel measures would be less complicated if fan attendance was not a consideration. So obviously that's what's going on. Obviously, what they pointed out in the article is very true. Could cause more injuries. Could cause more problems. You don't want to basically hurt or create injury or competitive disadvantage for players. Obviously, rest is one of the most important things you can give a player. And if this could take that away from them, as a team, you have to weigh. Is it worth making a move like this? But this is the situation that COVID has put people in. You might have to put your team more at risk to get the games played. So it'll be interesting to see again how everything kind of plays out when this happens, because if this stays a very lingering issue, this could have some bad results at the end of the day potentially if things are not fixed and changed when it gets down to it. But now we're going to get into our last team in the season review, the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins. A team that people don't know what to think. It's easy to say with Miami, you say 8-8. It is. Because, I mean, you expect them to be better than last year. They won 5 games. They added all this talent. They drafted the guy for the future in Tua. So what could we say? Maybe the floor is 8-8, maybe 7-9. If that's the floor, then what's the ceiling? Could Miami be the team that wins the division this year? Could they be a team that is this year's Tennessee? We don't know. Brian Flores has gotten a lot of recognition and respect in this league for the job that he has done with Miami. Obviously, Miami has been a franchise, again, like every other team in the AFC East outside of New England, that has a storied tradition, but they've never been consistently good. They've always been up and down, and their dysfunction as an organization has been apparent. And Miami fans are a great fan base. They want to believe that their team's going to be relevant, their team is going to be good, and their team is going to do something next year. They want to believe that they have everything needed in place to be successful. They want that to be the case. But is it going to work out at the end of the day? Is it going to be what they expect at the end of the day? You have Tua. Question with Tua, when is he going to play? People are saying start in week 1. Some people say you got to start Fitzpatrick because of what he did for the team. That's the first question. Then what is the rest of the team going to look like? You have new running backs and Matt Breida and Jordan Howard. Devontae Parker's looking for a second big year with Preston Williams coming back, who showed out as an undrafted rookie. You're getting Albert Wilson and Jakeem Grant back. Mike Gesicki's looking to build off success from last year as well at the end of the season. They've drafted 3 offensive linemen, signed, I believe, 2. So they have a whole new group of offensive linemen up front. Defensively, they spent a lot of money. They signed Byron Jones, the best corner from this year's free agency class, to go beside Xavier Howard. You made a lot of draft picks on defense as well. Added depth to the positions. You signed a lot of New England guys, Cal Van Noy. You know, you signed just all these players to take over for what you're going to do. Landon Roberts, sign him. Still got some guys, Bobby McCain, let go of Rashad Jones, etc., etc. You made a lot of differences. You signed 2 defensive ends. I mean, they've made a lot of additions and subtractions from this team. And so, what is Miami going to be this year? If people are going off what they hope happens or what they think can happen, Brian Flores is going to coach these boys up. And they're going to be sound, fundamentally. And their talent then will show, and they will develop. Because Miami's a very, very young team, especially offensively. Defensively is what's going to keep them in games, because their defense is young and talented. but also, and they have a lot of guys between 25 and 30. That's what, if you notice, a lot of their free agent pickups were between 25 and 29. So they're getting a lot of guys entering or in the prime of their careers. Offensively, you could have Tua, who's leading that show, who people project to be the guy, the future of the franchise. The man to take Miami out of this level of mediocrity, this sea of mediocrity that they've been in for years. People are expecting all of that. They're expecting something great to happen. And so it's going to be interesting to see, can Miami put it all together? Can they be what people think they can be, which is a great team? Remember, they tore it down last year. They made a lot of things happen. They rebuilt this team in a different image. And so they're just trying to play, and they're trying to see, is it all going to pay off? Will it all pay off? So we'll have to see how it works. I mean, remember, the AFC East is wide open. There is no definitive, oh yeah, they're going to be this good, or they're going to probably be this high, or they're going to be the worst, they're going to be the best. It's wide open. Miami could be the one coming out this year as the AFC East champions. Like I said, there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of excitement in Miami. And there's a lot of support behind Brian Flores and the job that he did his first year. And I think that's what's really pushing this train of Miami's momentum and hype, is that it feels like they finally have the guy at the helm, the head coach, a guy who you can sit here and say, he knows what he's doing, he has a plan in place, and he's doing it. And it's seeing results. Think about head coaches from the past decade they've had. Joe Philbin. What was his issue? Wasn't really a guy who could motivate players. A guy who kind of was stubborn. Stuck with what he knew, even if it wasn't working. Was predictable. Then Adam Gase. Thought young, fresh mind. First year, 11-5, made the playoffs. And then it just didn't work. Started having issues with different players. And just, it didn't work out. It felt like every week after a Miami game that second year, they were calling each other out. He was calling out his players. Players were calling him out. And we saw what happened the third year. It fell apart. He's out of there. The Tannehill experiment failed as well. So then Gase left. And now you have Brian Flores. And he came in there and he told Stephen Ross, listen, we're restarting this thing. We're going to be bad. We're going to be bad, but we're going to be good when it's all said and done. And that's why he's the driving force behind the hype. Miami has definitely an opportunity to be a playoff team this year in my eyes. They are my biggest wild card team in all of the NFL, because we don't know what Miami will truly be. We don't know. And it will be very fun and exciting to see what they end up being. Because they could dramatically shift the landscape of the NFL. So yeah, you could go ahead, if you're an analysis or another podcaster, say Miami's 8-8, third place team maybe, something like that. But if they're 10-6, 11-5, I wouldn't be shocked. I do feel like that Tua has to be the starting quarterback, though, for that to happen. Because obviously, if Tua is in the Rookie of the Year discussion, Miami must have had a pretty good year, I would think. Now, I mean, he could, unless he puts up numbers like Kyle Murray did, even on a losing team. But it also depends on the success of all the other rookies as well. So, Miami's definitely in a position this year, coming into the season, where they could be the team that creates some upsets and shakes some things up like they did at the end of last season. Brian Flores is an up-and-coming, promising young head coach. Tua is somebody who has big expectations of being the future and the guy since Dan Marino to finally securely handle that quarterback position in Miami. They have a lot of new acquisitions that they expect to come out there and contribute and be part of the reason why they're a good team. They have a lot of young players that they expect to come out, develop, get better day after day, game after game, month after month, and be ready to go and be able to play in the best moments when it's time to play. And it's just going to be all interesting at the end of the day to see how everything works out with this team and what they actually end up becoming at the end of the day. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with the Miami Dolphins this year. Even with all COVID happening and everything, I'll definitely keep an eye out for their season because they're definitely a team that you need to watch if you can this offseason. I mean, not offseason, this regular season. But thank you for tuning into the GSMC Football Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I was your host, Brice Lewis. Don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts here on the GSMC Podcast Network. Don't also forget to follow us on social media. And also, guys, stay safe out there. Wear your masks. NFL season's going to be here sooner than you know it. If everything sticks as planned, it will be here sooner than you know it. Got training camp coming back at the end of the month. Preseason the next month. Even if it's just 2 games. Preseason the next month. And then the regular season will be here before you know it. So just hang in there. Like I said, thanks for tuning into the GSMC Football Podcast. Have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.